Good morning, good evening, and maybe even good night at the time that you are listening to this. We are back. It is Farm to the Show with myself, Chris Dickerson, Disabled List Hall of Famer, former Red, accompanied by longtime buddy, opponent, longtime teammate, dear friend, Mr. Paul Janish, a man as deep as the ocean, lover of all things country, Tex-Mex, and crossword. We are back, and I appreciate everybody who's coming back this week. And we're going to get right into things today, Mr. Janish. As you know, that we had coincidentally, our show today was about the rule changes and seeing what's happened this weekend. We are going to dive right into this and kind of sort out some of this madness that we've been witnessing. I think a lot of it is something we all kind of suspected that would be an issue, but the first weekend of games, really seeing it come to fruition, has a lot of people on edge. If you've been paying attention to Twitter, there's been a lot of stuff out there where, people are unhappy. Some really like it, but also saying that players are going to adjust to it at some point. And so I'm excited to talk about it. I think it's a huge deal with what we're dealing with these changes, but also is getting a little bit deeper into the player perspective of what that's like. And I think that's important rather than just having these, talking heads talking about, the fans and the attention span and, shortening game time. There's a lot more to it. So I think today's going to be really interesting because it's just perfect timing from everything that I've seen in these different highlights throughout the week. And I think today's going to be great.
Yeah, so just to echo kind of what you got going over there, Chris, the pitch clock thing presented itself pretty quick, right? And I think there's a couple of different ways to look at it. First of all, philosophically, I don't hate the idea of trying to make the game a little crisper, move it along a little bit, and they've used it in the minor leagues the last couple of years, which it sounds like has gone fairly smooth. After the initial buffer period of the players making the adjustment. That being said, for me, I think it's going to be a bigger adjustment for the hitters. The pitchers got the ball in their hand; they can dictate it. With the pitch calm now, the communication between the catcher and the pitcher, I think, is going to be a little bit more streamlined. That's going to take care of itself. But I do think that from an offensive standpoint, when you got guys that are used to walking up to the plate and taking their time, and even if it being in between pitches, having the opportunity to kind of step back and kind of regroup or reevaluate what's going on, those kind of things. I think it's going to be a bigger adjustment for the offense, and we saw it a couple times this week. And I know I saw Manny Machado get into the box the first time, his first at bat of a game, and had a strike called on him. Now it's a spring training game. Obviously, he's going to roll with it. Manny's a veteran. But it does beg the question: what if that's the eighth inning of a game against the Dodgers, and a game that really matters? And how does he react then? And I think a huge part of it is going to be the communication between umpires and how they handle the situation, because it sounds like they're getting the opportunity to use some discretion on their part, which will be really interesting to see how those interactions go, in particular in some high leverage situations. So I just hope that we're going to go through spring training here. We're going to see how things unfold. Obviously, we had the deal with the Braves where the game actually ended, on a time violation, which to me is borderline absurd. I don't think there's got to be some stipulations that prevent games ending on a violation via the clock was at 7 seconds before he had the opportunity to look up. But I'm just curious to see how in real games with some of the people, with some of the players that people pay to come see play, at the end of the game and high leverage situations, how are those situations going to get handled? And I think it's going to be interesting to watch it unfold.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into it, we'll just go over the quick wrap. This weekend, the Reds coming out of the box with two W's this weekend, which is great. And we talked about the spring training preview last week, but still, when you're coming out and you can get two wins early on, any win is a positive. That means whoever you're putting in there is doing what they're supposed to do, putting runs on the board, playing defense. Both spring training wins over the Giants and the Guardians, and with Matt McClain walk-off homer to beat the Guardians 4-3 on Saturday. That's a good start in any regards. So moving on to the pitch timer, I'm gonna give you guys the actual definition here of what the rule is. And so for here we have the pitch timer. So just to recap for everybody, we have the pitch timer, shift limits, and the bigger bases. The pitch timer, the length of games will still be determined by innings, not minutes, but to create a crisper pace, there will be a 30-second timer between batters and then a shorter time limit between pitches. Pitchers will be required to begin their motion 15 seconds after receiving the ball with the bases empty or 20 seconds after receiving the ball with runners on base. If they don't, they will be charged with an automatic ball. Pitchers will also be limited to 2 disengagements from the mound, i.e., pickoff attempts or step offs, per plate appearance with a runner on first. The disengagements reset the clock. Batters, meanwhile, must be in the batter's box and alert to the pitcher by the 8-second mark on the clock, or else they will be charged with an automatic strike. So, looking at all of these, we saw this happen at every level here. So we've had a number of different things happen just from the first AB of spring training. Colton Wong coming in, first at bat of spring training, Seattle game. The pitch clock, it's big. It's big. It's noticeable. It looks like a play. It looks like an NFL play clock to where it's big enough to where everybody on the field can see it. But it's just something about the 60 feet, 6 inches that it kind of gives you a little bit anxiety, a little bit. And looking at it, it's just this countdown. And I don't know what it looks like from a hitter's perspective. I'm assuming that it's got to be like out in left center, so the hitters know as well. But looking at the pitcher and seeing this thing count down gave me a little bit of angst, because as soon as that hit the mark, you're in the box, you're ready to go, and Colton takes this huge, daddy hack, fouls the ball off, and then right back into the box. And what I've noticed is it takes away, like, as a hitter, you have your routine. And I'm not talking about stepping out of the box and doing the whole Nomar thing with the batting gloves and the helmet and like the deep breaths. It's affecting guys to where you can't even do the bat with. For you, I know you are like a 1-2 type of 3 little wiggle or whatever. These guys are just getting back in, and it's like tap on the plate and it's right back in the stands. Ball's fouled off, strike 1, strike 2. You can't, no stepping out of the box, right back in. Ball is on its way. And it's watching the kid from Washington as well. And granted, nobody is going to be better suited for this than Max Scherzer, who is a no nonsense, get on the mound and fire at you, and no, not taking no shit from anybody. And that K in 27 seconds yesterday, you could tell he's always been on top of it. But again, having this mandate in place, I think is still going to be something that the guys are going to have to get used to. Because there was one particular, you could tell that this guy was in the box and he wanted to take like another swing or wiggle, but Max was already ready to go. And that type of stuff is like, you don't have those couple extra seconds to really get that breath and to really do, your whole routine. And that's what's most important. And those were kind of some of the blaring issues. And then going back to the 8-second mark, like you said, we're talking about the game ending. We had another scenario with James Karinchak. Spell check me, pronunciation check me on that, everybody. From Cleveland, where he had an automatic ball called because it didn't stop after a ball request. And so when we talk about the disengagements, stepping off, calling time or a pickoff, this would technically this would qualify as a disengagement, is getting that new ball. And so I think, as you said, is a umpire discretion, but there are also going to be a number of things that are going to have to be discussed. They're going to have to be brought up, and Terry Francona is going to be one of those guys that's going to be highlighted as far as those conversations go and how to move forward with this.
Yeah, it's interesting to see like how like to your point how it's going to unfold, but I gotta believe that it's gonna work itself out. The example with the getting a new ball, I'm gonna assume, I don't know for sure, but I'm gonna assume that was a little bit of a mistake on the umpire's part, not resetting the clock. There's all these new hand gestures and whatnot that the umpires are gonna have, relative to communicating with the press box. There's those things are gonna have to get worked out. But um, again, going back to it, and with regards to the Max Scherzer example, I think it's it can be a tactic from the pitcher's standpoint. Like if you're grabbing the ball and ready to go, it can definitely be playing a little bit of offense on defense, if that makes sense. And I think that we're going to see that more often. And there's going to be some cat and mouse with regards to figuring out from a competitive standpoint how you can use some of these things to your advantage both ways, right? And we're going to get into some of the base running stuff, I'm sure, but there the fact that you can only throw over two times, at least at the minor league level, has turned into a lot more base running opportunities with regards to steals, and a little bit more gamesmanship with getting big leads and trying to induce the throw over and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, we're talking about really high level athletes, right? And they're gonna make the adjustments, regardless of if you need that extra bat wiggle or whatever the case might be. There's gonna be that adjustment deal. But at the end of the day, these guys are good at what they do. They're getting paid to play the game, and they're gonna make the appropriate adjustments. I just think that there's gonna be some give and take initially, and it sounds like, hopefully we can get it accomplished during spring training. But it sounds like at the minor league level, the first 4 to 6 weeks of the season kind of worked itself out, and then there was, the amount of violations were cut in half, and it sounds like the players kind of business as usual, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you out there, I mean, I think there's kind of a visual aspect to it, when you're talking about getting in the box and getting this. And this the one thing, if you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel and check out our episode, I'm in studio. So, Paul, as you know, since we're here, what I'm talking about is when you get in the box and you have this ability. When you get in, you tap in, you dig in, you get your helmet, you do your tap. And for a lot of guys, like, you have this natural rhythm that you get in, and it could be like a one or a two or one of these, and then you're ready to go. And what I saw a lot of this weekend was, it was get in the box, clock's going, you're getting in, it's like, okay, ready, swing. Clock is on, and you're back in the box, and they're already, 7 seconds ready. You have to be alert and engaged. There's no more this, there's no more. And Bryce Harper is one of those guys, which I'm really interested to see. You come out, you do the thing, do your batting gloves, and then he does the far, the near, off the cleat, and then he's ready to go. And so there were a number of at bats yesterday where they was just get in the box, bat on shoulder. Okay, strike one. All right, guy, already balls on the way, and it's, you want to like do the tap or get out, and it's, a lot of guys are just getting caught in between of like, okay, maybe I do need one more wiggle, maybe I do need this, maybe I need to adjust my helmet. And so I thought it was really interesting, and I think that's a part of just getting anxiety, because it's as if hitting a baseball isn't hard enough, not having that rhythm, and not just being, just kind of thrown into the fire. But as you said, we get paid a lot of money. We're elite professionals to do this, and the statistics have showed themselves to be in the favor of the rule, like you said, in the minor leagues. And it's important to note that the first month, or I think the first two to 3 weeks, there was two infractions for every game for the first 2 to 3 weeks. And eventually that started to get phased out of, as more and more guys got used to the rule. It got phased out. But getting that initial period was really difficult for everybody, both on the hitters and the pitchers. And so it's one thing if you could get the minor leaguers to get on board with it, to get adjusted to it, then surely these guys will get adjusted to it as well. And so when we're talking about that first 2 weeks, well, we have 6 weeks of spring training. So I mean, there's significant time and an allotted amount of time where everybody will be adjusted by the time opening day comes.
Yeah, and again, it's the kind of thing too. Like, I read an article today. 46% of guys that are on 40-man rosters right now have been exposed to the pitch clock in the minor leagues the last couple of years. So it's not exactly like, okay, everybody in the big leagues has never done it, right? I mean, I think that the ones in questions are going to be the veteran guys that are used to doing their deal the way that they do it, and now they're going to have an umpire, and there's a huge wave of younger umpires as well, and so there's going to be that dynamic with, the older, more established guys that are accustomed to doing it a certain way, that it'll work itself out. But it's gonna be fun to watch, because we're gonna have some famous rich guys that are getting upset about having somebody tell them to get in the box when they're not ready to do it. But
Oh,
I I,
100%.
I I still think it's going to work itself out pretty quickly. But and the other dynamic is an older umpire, right? A veteran guy, take like a Angel Hernandez, CB Buckner type umpire with a rookie player. What's that interaction going to be like? Because you and I both know how, you know on the flip side, those veteran umpires are accustomed to some things too, and it'll be exciting to watch, and I'm sure there's going to be some ruffled feathers to start.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that was more that nothing could have been more evident than right off the bat. A guy of Manny Machado's stature just going straight up 0-1. And I think at some point, and I could be mistaken, but he said there's I can see that there's going to be a number of 0-1 situations happening where just simply not ready. But a guy like him, it's not going to matter. So him having to break out no matter what his stature and what his level and superstardom is going to be like. He's going to have to figure it out as well. And first AB of spring training going 0-1 and not even having this the concern over this 8-second rule pretty much tells you everything we need to know about where some of these guys are starting and where we're gonna have to get to. So, like I said, one of the most interesting storylines there. Now, moving on to shift restrictions, which I was also really pleased to see yesterday. Young Darren Baker getting his first knock in spring training, and much to my surprise, going the other way, which of course isn't an archaic scenario. I think we've gotten so used to guys pulling the ball into the shift, but Darren going the other way. But what surprised me most is that there was an actual shortstop actually playing in his position, and to have this six hole kind of exploited and to see something squeak through and not just kind of have this blaring gap in gaping hole on the left side of the infield. It was fun to see. So shout out to young Darren Baker for getting his first hit. We obviously, Paul, we go way back to Darren being a young kid, 9 and 10 years old, running around. And if you want to feel old, which we definitely do, this Monday, which we usually do, because I'm sure between Paul and I, something comes up on a daily basis that makes us feel pretty old. Like the highlights in the background. 2012 is that's a decade, but seeing young Darren Baker out there run around and stealing a base at the run stealing a base as well brings us to the next point where you're talking about gamemanship and bringing back the effectiveness of players like that. Guys who can run, we're back. The advantage is shifting back to guys that can run to utilize and exploit the running game, where I think we might be looking at a possible NFL scenario where you might be like a defensive tackle or a middle linebacker who is being able to time that clock. So if you're down in that 5 second 3-2-1 and you're blitzing, you can essentially look at that play clock and time it. I would have to imagine that scenario might come into play for base runners as well. As you see that clock jumping, you're going to have to know that your engagements or his disengagements have already been used up. And right at that 1 second mark, that you're going. So I think that's going to be another really interesting storyline as far as the pitch clock and the base running.
Yeah, for sure. And shout out to Darren's obviously Dusty Baker's son, and that's what Chris is referring to. We had the opportunity to be around him when he was young, and I'm in college baseball right now. So Darren obviously played at Cal and had a pretty successful college career as well. So yeah, hopefully he does well. But going to the shift restrictions is, I love it. I think it will bring back an element into the game of super dynamic, athletic, middle infielders, but also the putting the priority again on the ability to defend in the middle of the field as a whole, right? And I know you as a left-handed hitter got to be fired up about it, because I would argue that the left-handed hitter was the one most affected by the shift and putting three people on the right side of the field. But it'll I like it. I think it's gonna be a little bit of a different adjustment. Kind of to your point, the initial shift when it started happening, kind of at the beginning of our careers, there was a lot of situations where that ball that you're referring to, whether it was a left-handed hitter hitting it to the six hole or a right-handed hitter hitting it to the four hole, the ball gets hit to a place where pitchers were used to guys being there, and then there was nobody there, right? So that was an initial deal. Now we're going to flip back the other way, but overall, I like it. I think from an integrity of the game standpoint, it provides the from a defensive perspective, the type of, like, the way the game was supposed to be played, so to speak. So I'm excited to see how that goes. But with regards to the base running, there's no doubt, man. Again, it's going to become an offensive tool again, I think. And it's interesting that you bring up the point of kind of timing the clock, because that's going to be a real thing. There's 3 or 4 of those clocks all over the field that are visible, to the players, and it's going to present itself. It just is. And in addition to that, I was watching the Blue Jays game yesterday, and the Romano, their closer, they picked a guy off second base, and I would be curious to know when the last time he even ran a pickoff was. But
Right.
I think it's going to create those things where the pickoff may not just be used as a pickoff. You can even use it in, if you've already used your resets or your disengagements, as a way to, reset the clock, so to speak, right? But I'm just interested to see how that goes. But I love the prioritizing the athleticism, the guys that can really run and kind of change the game in that way, because that's something that, you know, in some ways has kind of been lost in the game.
Yeah, 100%. And as a base runner, from myself, I was always a guy with the green light. And so looking at the clock, God, that's got to make it so easy. If you are a base stealer, there's no second guessing whether you should go or not. It's like you have that extra advantage where, okay, 1 second, I know exactly when I'm going, where I'm going, when I'm going, why I'm going. And it takes that second hand, that doubt out of your mind, where it's like, all right, I'm off to the races with that. Once that thing hits 1 second, we're going to be looking for him to make a move. There's no holding the ball anymore. Once you get to that set position, there's no long hold. There's no 2, 3 looks. If he's behind, you're coming down, he's set, he's doing his 2 looks. He's going to have to make a decision if he's coming over or not. So we're doing away with the excess pickoffs, the 2, 3, 4 pickoffs. It's, hey, that's 2. All right, well, he didn't get me. 1, 2, 1, off to the races. Here we go. And that's the type of action that I'm looking forward to bringing back. So to bring back to the actual definition for everybody, the shift restrictions. The defensive team must have a minimum of 4 players on the infield, with at least 2 infielders completely on either side of second base. These restrictions are intended to increase the batting average on balls in play and allow infielders to better showcase their athleticism with great defensive plays. Potentially, we'll see. I think athleticism. I think that everybody is incredibly athletic. I don't think there's any doubt of that. But as far as we still got to put the ball in the play at the end of the day, the ball still has to be put in the play. But when it
If
does,
you,
we're
if you could
taking
get
that
the
we're taking that part out of it. Like, okay, we're going to move everybody, but we're still dealing with we're in this 2023 where between walks and strikeout ratio and the just from batted balls being put into play, there's no rule that's going to fix that. That's a whole other can of worms that we'll probably get into at some point, especially with Paul being here and having a unique insight to what the college athlete, where the college game is at right now, where the youth sports space and what these kids are learning coming up as far as like swing mechanics. And we'll get to that eventually, but that's also another thing to note is you can put people wherever you want to, but you still have to make contact. And me personally, looking at some of these guys throwing, I do not know how that's possible. Talking to Trevor Plouffe a couple weeks ago, and he said, I'm so glad I'm not in the game right now because and I don't blame him. You look at these guys that are throwing. To give you perspective, to let's say 2009, our 2008, 2009, our rookie year, there may have been 1, 2, or 3 guys throwing 100 miles per hour in the league. We have starters on a regular basis these days throwing 197 to 100 miles per hour. And it's just, with 92 mile per hour sliders, you got Sandy Alcantara who's throwing 94 mile per hour changeups. It's tough to hit. So putting the ball in the play, we'll see what happens. But thank goodness it's easier for me to watch on TV, and then even on TV, I'm like, I don't even understand how these guys are doing this. Paul, I don't
yeah,
know if you feel the same way.
yeah. If we could get a restriction on velocity, that would help. But to your point, it's not so much the fact that there wasn't as many guys throwing 100. I'd be curious to know. We need to check tape on this, Dickie. But just the average fastball velocity in baseball right now, right? Like that's my deal. It's the prevalence. It's like there's no let up, man. And the way that starting pitchers are used versus the bullpens now versus 10 to 15 years ago is different. There's just there's more guys that have specific roles, and the bullpens are just deeper. The old adage of like, hey, let's get into that bullpen, let's get the starter out and get in that
Yeah.
bullpen is like
You don't want to get in
that's
the bullpen.
no,
You
dude,
want
that's for
you
the
want
birds.
no part you want no part of the bullpen. And that's what's funny about this the WBC coming up. You want no part of that bullpen. Zero part. You want to get through the starters, get through Johnny, get through Cueto, who's just going to kind of pitch you to death 92, 93 with his funky shimmies, but you want no part of that bullpen because those are the elite closers in the game, and everybody coming out of that bullpen throws absolute fuel. And not just from a right hand perspective, but you have guys lefties that we've just never seen besides the likes of a Billy Wagner who are throwing 96, 97 plus. It's a completely different game these days, and it's just it boggles my mind. And from these guys throwing these just absolute just wipeout sliders, change up splits, it's impressive to see where the game is, and I think it's a lot of it has to do with obviously modern technology and the way that guys are preparing, where these modern throwing programs are at. It's pretty special to witness, but like you said, you don't want to get in that bullpen.
No, no. There's a lot of variables to the prevalence of velocity. To your point, like guys are bigger and stronger and faster, and from a younger age, doing more specific training relative to baseball and throwing specifically. But but it's exciting to watch. There's nothing like watching the game on TV and seeing the flames come up because there's triple digits going up again. So from a fan's perspective, it's great, and baseball's doing the right thing. They're trying to spread the defense out, and maybe give the hitters a fighting chance.
Right. And I won't get into the numbers, but an interesting thing was at winter meetings a couple years ago, and there was these kids, and I call them the backpack kids at winter meetings because it's all these kids from around the country, from the best and the brightest, and a lot of them are quote unquote team managers, which basically means that they're the statisticians or analysts on the team. And so you have these kids with their Harvard backpacks, their even some Rice kids, Harvard.
Sure.
Um, you, Massachusetts Amherst is a big baseball school. I think there's been a number of GMs that come out of there. So as far as these
Hmm.
analytic programs that are coming out, you have a lot of these kids that are pursuing degrees in analytics, hoping to get into baseball. And so I particularly remember this one group that was sitting at a Starbucks, and they were putting together a model that would basically reconfigure free agency based around what their batting average would have been if there was no shift. And so
Mm,
they had this program that basically reconstructed all the balls hit on the spray chart, and if there was no based on velocity and contact quality,
right.
would then be reverted to a hit. And so basically being able to go in and saying, hey, instead of hitting 265 without the shift, he would have intentionally hit 275, 280, which put him in another category of free agent of free in the market.
Yeah.
I thought
Right.
that I thought that was I thought that was really fascinating
Yeah.
if they could pull it off. So this is going to be really interesting to see who benefits and who can recover some, really recoup some of these hits with this shift back and going back to a traditional style of infield.
Yeah. That's some forward thinking stuff. Are you sure it wasn't a rice backpack? I got to believe that
I'm
those
I'm
are.
definitely I'm definitely sure. I know a Rice backpack when I see it. I just don't think the Rice kids are capable of coming up with such a complex and innovative system.
I'd put them up against anybody, bud. Okay, just telling you. Hit me with the bigger bases. How are the bigger bases going to affect the game?
I think I actually have to go to the bathroom. I don't know what's the
You'll
bathroom
be fine.
protocol in here.
We got like 7, 8 more minutes, bud. You'll be fine.
I don't know. It's coming on pretty strong. I had that coffee and it kind of, breaks things up, breaks things open for me a
Hmm.
little bit. So
Um,
I might have to take the break, but I'm gonna gut it out. I'm gonna
there
gut
you
it
go.
out. We're gonna get on to bigger bases here. So the bigger bases, third change this year. First, second, and third have been expanded from 15 inches on each side to 18 inches on each side, while home plate remains unchanged. The primary reason why the bases are bigger is safety, giving fielders and runners more room to operate without colliding, but the slightly decreased distance between bases could help runners on stolen base attempts and bang bang plays. Yes, that's we'll see what happens with that. I think we're getting down to the nitty gritty as far as like the geometrics of the game in itself. Who knows? But we're talking about 3 additional inches. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But the main point here is the safety concern. And I think for this particular thing is big for both of us because both of us have suffered from instances where potentially a bigger base could have saved us, but not just minor injuries, severe injuries. Paul, 2004, Dayton, Ohio, or 2005. I'm sorry, I was in Dayton in
Yeah.
2004,
Yeah.
in
Oh
which I
five.
did have a scenario. I did have a scenario sliding headfirst, sealing a base, and that focus of being able to go to the outside of the base. I ended up hitting the shortstop's arm and bent my arm, very similar to what happened to you in 2005. So I had this instance where I ended up partially tearing my UCL diving head first, in which it probably would have been a scenario where I would have had more base to see in
Sure.
for my stolen base attempt. Who knows? 2005, you're running down to first base, you collide with the first baseman. You
Yep.
end up actually tearing your UCL and having to have Tommy John. Not as It is not a easy recovery by any means. That put you out for close to a year, in which you're having a really decent year going into
Mhm.
that Dayton year. So looking at both of that, from a safety standard, I'm completely open to it. I fully understand it in increasing the space in which we operate in, and then going to 2009, I had a scenario where it was a 3-2 count, and I was thinking about going quick pick over, kind of startled a little bit, but I was aiming for the back part of the bag. But the particular throw was the outside part, kind of creating the situation where I had to use kind of an abnormal gesture to go for another part of the base, and I ended up coming it short, flipping my ankle over. It was one of the looking back at the video, one of the worst things that I've seen, because the center field camera, you could see the bottom of my cleat from behind me, which is pretty disturbing the more I talk about it. But that pain, that severely sprained ankle, put me out for almost 6 weeks at a pretty particular time where I did not need to be missing time.
Right.
It was definitely at a time where I was on the up and up, and I was finally kind of getting into the swing of things and getting missing that 6 months of time. It's no different than you is taking that time out when you're really getting into your game, you're feeling good at the plate, and to miss that amount of time. But yours was I wouldn't say it's catastrophic, but it definitely it was a big deal for you that might have
Yeah.
been
No.
avoided.
At the end of the day, yeah, we both had circumstances that you just mentioned, but at the end of the day, it's for the safety aspect. I don't. I'm curious. 3 inches is a big deal. Don't get me wrong. It is. It can be at times, especially with the implementation of replay now. Every inch counts, so to speak. I think more about, to your point about the stolen base, to second or third, and on tag plays in particular. I think that the interaction at first is going to be pretty uneventful relative to collisions. I think it'll help with collisions. The bang bang play at first on like a slow roller type thing. It's going to present itself, a handful of times over the course of the year. I don't think that's going to be huge. I think the interaction at second base, is going to play a larger role, whether that's a force play or a stolen base situation or whatever the case is, even a double play. And being in contact with the bag, I think that's going to help the infielders. Right, there's more base to be touching. Um, all that being said, I think this one, relative to some of the other changes, kind of goes unnoticed. I don't think it's a big deal. As big of a deal is probably a better way to say it. I will say one of the funnier things I saw, or heard rather, was players referencing what the new bases look like, and it looks like there's a pizza box on the field.
Yeah,
Um, because if we could get an actual photo, it is a significant difference. 15 to 18 inches doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's if you get a picture of the two bases next to each other, it's a fairly significant.
right.
Um,
It's the circumference. We're not talking about like a softball base where you have, if you've ever seen those park bases where you have like the safety base on the outside, it's not extending just
right.
a couple inches on one side for more. It's the circumference. And so you're talking about a square here, but that 3 inches expanded, it becomes a very significant increase.
Yeah.
And I think you guys are getting the benefit of the doubt as middle infielders with all the rules that have been put on, especially again having a scenario like the I believe it was the 2015 or 2016 National League Championship Series with the Dodgers and the Mets, the Chase Utley scenario, where sliding past
Mm,
the bag and breaking the leg of the shortstop. And so let's keep things in, confined into the base, no going outside, no hook slides, but having, a way to at least where you're making contact. Yeah, that will potentially be easier. But again, going back, now you guys have where you guys would have benefited of not being able to go past the bag, having a bigger base to where you guys can now utilize that extra space in the bag to shield yourselves from that breaking up of the double play. Yeah, it certainly is in
sure.
favor, and it again, it's another level added to what essentially could be a increased safety protocol.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I think that one is going to be pretty easy. I think that one, relative to the other ones, goes fairly unnoticed, but we'll see.
So taking to the 2005, just just walk me through exactly what happened, because 15 years later, I'm not even sure. I think we just kind of hear, up the pipeline. It's like Paul, ran into there was, and what I imagine in my head, ball comes up the line, is ball kind of thrown up the line. First baseman reaches out, your arm gets tangled,
Yeah, so
and
here's the scenario. If you can believe this, out in front and on an off-speed pitch, hit the ball off the end of the bat. Jailbreak, run into first base. Bad throw from an infielder. Throwing on the run. The first baseman's essentially jumping slash reaching for the ball that takes him into the line a little bit. We run into each other. There's nowhere to go. I fall, put my arm down, and pop. The UCL just clean tear, total freak accident. But and to your point, like if there's more base for both of us to share, it's very feasible to think that he would not have had to, you know, come into the line, and or what's probably more likely is I would have had more base to reach for and not had to run into him potentially. But those types of plays are there's just they happen so fast, right? And there's nowhere to go. I think it's the kind of thing that from a safety issue, it's gonna help. To what extent is hard to say. I mean, if that throw takes the first baseman into the line to a point to where there's still nowhere to go, we're still going to run into each other, right? But like we both know, it's a game of inches, so it's going to help. I mean, it's going to provide a safer play. The other thing I think about is the plays where you, much more so than myself, but would feasibly slide head first into first base and trying to evade a tag on a similar type play where the throw pulls the first baseman off and he's trying to do the swipe tag and the player goes low and turns into a head first slide into first. So those kind of plays is what it's gonna help with.
yeah, and the cleaning at first base too, where you have to, first baseman have to dig a ball, and just like the way the footwork is set, you're not going to at least be completely centered up on the bag. You might have to shift to do backhand pick, but maybe your foot is too much on the base, and having that extra 3 inches off to the side of the bag, you're going to avoid having to step on that first baseman's foot, or vice versa. And you see a lot of that where feet get tangled, guys get spiked from having these interactions and just simply not having enough of base, and that again can lead to rolled ankles. But nobody likes getting spiked, and we've seen that going back to Manny. And that's one of the things where Manny had plenty of room there on that one play where Manny, when his first year in the Dodgers, where he ultimately started the bad rap of being a
Mhm.
dirty player and purposely stepping on the foot when there was enough base there. But now putting in this, there should be absolutely no excuse for shit like that anymore. So
Sure.
those are our three. Those are our three. So we got 5 weeks left. It'll be I'm looking forward to how they adjust, and just from a day-to-day basis, I think that's what excites me most. Is we're these guys are elite athletes who can make adjustments from at bat to bat, and so as we move forward with the games, I'm curious to see how we pan these out. And I'm sure by week 2 we're going to break down the numbers, and we're going to talk about all the infractions, and hopefully by week 4 and 5, where everybody's getting squared away to go, we got night games coming in, guys are getting into real game action, ready for opening day, that everybody will be comfortable with these new
Yeah.
rule changes. So moving on, we're going to lighten it up a little bit. We're going to talk about top 5 baseball movies of all time. We're going to run through these really quick, and I'm going to start this off, and Paul, with you, Paul. And for everybody watching on the YouTube channel, please drop your top 5 baseball movies into the comments, because I personally, after the first show, I see you guys commenting in there. I appreciate all the Paul Janish fans out there and the compliments on the last show. Paul is apparently a Reds legend,
Yeah.
number one
Hold
in everyone's
hold your
heart,
breath.
number seven, number 7 on the field, number 1 in everybody's hearts.
Mhm.
So Paul, yeah, let's start off with you, so you can take your fan club legion of YouTube and see what everybody loves.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know exactly how big that snowball of a fan club is, bud, but, I'll start off the movies. I'm a big Bull Durham fan going back in the day. I will say one of my cooler minor league, stories slash anecdotes is, hitting a homer off of the bull in Durham on my minor league tenure, so that was kinda fun, but Bull Durham's a pretty classic. Um, a close second for me is Field of Dreams. Big
Oh,
fan, just a oldie but goodie. Uh, and then to lighten it up and kind of with I have a 11 and 9-year-old right now, and so The Sandlot and the Rookie of the Year are two big ones at our house too. So those
classics.
are it's just tough to beat, man. Tough to beat. What do you got? Give me some of
Yeah,
yours.
I
I'm sure
think
there's some
I'm
crossover.
right on. I'm right on with you. So I mean, I think you went through 4. I'm going to throw in. I'm going to throw in 5. I'm going to throw in the. I'm throwing once again another Kevin Costner baseball movie. Not just Bull Durham, but For the Love of the Game. I feel like that's a great baseball movie. The baseball's terrible. John C. Riley is a terrible baseball player. And this is why I give so much credit to Rookie of the Year, because if you actually go and look at the cast of characters from Rookie of the Year, they all played like minor league baseball. A lot of them. Uh, do you remember Leon Bull Durham,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
was the first baseman in that movie, was the AAA hitting coach in Toledo? And so having that I wouldn't say, let's not say elite, but as far as baseball goes, it's a lot better than Rookie of the Year and having Henry Rodengartner throw the way that he did. But there was some legit baseball action, and just seeing having guys like Randy Johnson, Carlos Baerga, Ken Griffey Jr. make cameos in the field makes that movie for me everything. And for the love of the game, I think that's just really interesting, is seeing somebody at so great, more just from kind of like from the mental side as you start dwindling down in the career, just what your lifestyle and where you're at as far as a player and a person, I find is really interesting. I think we look too much at it as like what the baseball action was, but I definitely put that in my top 5, and I'll probably even sneak in Major League.
Oh yeah,
I
dude.
don't even think
Willie
that has to be
Mays.
snuck in. I don't even think that has to be
No.
snuck in. I think that's a bona fide top 5. So
Yeah.
Sandlot, Bull Durham, uh,
Field of
For the Love of
Dreams
the Game, Field of Dreams, app 100%,
and Major League.
and Major League 1 and 2. 3 we can throw out the window. 3 doesn't even exist to me when they go back. Yeah, back to the minors. But 1 and 2, absolute all-time classics.
It's hard to argue. Hard to argue. It's a good list. I look forward to hearing what some of the comments are and some of the other movies that people appreciate.
So do just that. Go visit us on if you want to watch the full version on the YouTube version. Go check us out. Go subscribe to Believe. Check us. Leave your favorite movies in the comments. But even moving forward, please let us know in the comments what you like to see us cover. If you guys have any comments, questions, we'll be happy to
Mhm.
answer them. We want this to be a place where we want to open kind of it up. I often think about this podcast as like the old radio shows where you could call in and be like, yeah, this is 97.8, and we're taking the top 5 calls at 5 and having people call in. We'll try to do our best. We don't have an open line here because the show is delayed, but please leave your comments, your concerns in the comments. We'll try to do our best to bring them up on the next call. If you're on the podcast, go give us a like and a subscribe. We'll be back next week, where technically I would have dropped this like I did last week, what we have on tap for next week, but I have
Well,
our
we'll
minor league
see.
wage
Hey,
thing.
Dickie,
We'll get into that a little bit.
we're gonna
Yeah,
be we're gonna be a podcast for the people, man. We'll see what the comments say, and we'll give the
that's
people what
right.
they want.
100%. You're completely right. I apologize. That is contradictory on my part. I can't have you guys go in the comments telling me what you want to hear and already have a pre-laid out topic list for next week. But in
Oh
case you
man.
were interested, people, we're going to be talking about minor league baseball and the class action lawsuit and how that's going to kind of change the landscape of minor league baseball from two individuals who spent far more time in the minor leagues than we'd ever liked, getting that, seeing what that's all about. So, everybody, again, thanks for listening. I'm Chris Dickerson, Paul Janish. We will see you next week.